There may not be a better window thrower in the NFL when he's on his game than Tua. And see, to me, that looks pretty because that, to me, is playing quarterback at a high level.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a teaching tutorial Thursday presented by DraftKings, which means the man Greg Cosell from NFL Films is in the house. Always love talking with Greg, especially about quarterbacks. Very much looking forward to talking with Greg momentarily. I'm actually recording this show from Vegas right now. Those of you that follow me on social media, and you should, have noticed at Ross Tucker NFL, I have been out here for Mountain West Media Days. My first hint or clue for you guys as to some of the college football games I'll be broadcasting for CBS this season. I'm out here in Vegas, in particular at the Circa, which is just unbelievable. An amazing place. Big fan of the Circa. Hospitality's been fantastic so far. I'm also a big fan of those of you that go the extra mile in any way to help support the show. Maybe that's spreading the word via social media. I noticed Carolyn, I'm going to say Gagnon. I don't know how to say Gagnon. She made a comment on the at Ross Tucker Pod IG. The sponsor confirmation email winner, nobody did it that I saw. I've gotten several emails from people that want to be in the Fantasy Feast Best Ball, but nobody actually sent in a sponsor that wanted to be able to ask me a question and or get a signed press pass. And then the YouTube shout out, Cameron Birch, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Love giving out winners. All you have to do is spread the word via social media or take advantage of a sponsor or just make a comment on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Greg, we are getting closer, my friend. We are less than 2 weeks from most of the teams being in training camp. We're less than a month away, at least from my first preseason game with the Eagles, getting very excited. And I wanted to talk quarterbacks with you today, more just the position and how it's changed. I don't know if we'll get into any specific guys. If we do, it's likely some of the top college quarterbacks that will be top prospects in the 2025 NFL draft. There are a couple guys in the news this week that I wanted to bring up because I always like to get your thoughts on the guys in the news. Cam Sutton, who's back with the Steelers, suspended 8 games under the personal conduct policy. He's going to miss almost half the year.
Yeah.
The Steelers obviously value him enough that they brought him back. Interesting thing there, Greg. He was in Pittsburgh. Detroit gave him pretty good money, really good money. He goes there last year. It did not really work out. I don't know what they would have done with him, but after the off-the-field issue, they got rid of him, and now he's back in Pittsburgh. What's his deal as a player?
Yeah, I think ultimately, he's played both outside and the slot throughout his career. And I think ultimately he's a slot corner. That's where he's at his best. And I think when he plays on the outside, which he did a good amount in Detroit, and with the Lions, Aaron Glenn, in an ideal world, he's their DC. He would like to play man coverage and a lot of press. You have to have the people who can do that, and I'm not sure Cam Sutton fit that role. So they struggled a bit, as we know, the Lions at the outside corner position, and have revamped that totally with what they've done this offseason, and that's why Sutton wasn't going to be there anyway, because he just didn't fit with what they want to do. But I think at his best, he's a slot corner.
So this is where I think it's fascinating, and this is where you and I can kind of nerd out a little bit. He played very well in the slot for the Steelers, very well, to the point where the Lions gave him a really nice contract because they felt like they needed a corner. They put him outside most of the time. It did not go well. So we'll never know, Greg, How much of that was the front office said, here's an affordable corner we can get, you guys make the most out of him, or whether it was the DB coach or Aaron Glenn that said, that's the guy we want. But you would think free agency would be more successful than it is. I mean, that's bad, Greg. I mean, I have to look up what they paid him, but they paid him well.
Yeah.
And then they put him in a different role than the role he excelled at in Pittsburgh. And it was kind of a disaster. And I guess, I don't know again that we'll ever know, but I'm just fascinated by that dynamic. Like, what went on there? Because that's like a case study, right? Like, what went on there that they identified him as the guy they wanted? Was it a misidentification by the front office? Was it misidentification by the coaching staff? Was it misuse? Was he misused by the coaching staff? Or did they sign Sutton and then they got Brian Branch in the draft later and they were like, okay, well, Branch isn't an outside corner. Branch is a nickel, so that's what he's going to play. I mean, the whole thing is really interesting.
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of really good points there. We don't want to spend too much time on this, but at the time they signed Sutton, the draft had not occurred yet. They didn't know they would get Branch. And Brian Branch, when you watched his tape from Alabama, he was a great prospect, and obviously has turned out to be, in his rookie season, a really, really good slot corner. They didn't know any of that. So we don't know if when they signed Sutton, they thought he would be their slot corner, but then they drafted Branch, who's a better player inside and is going to be one of the best slot corners in the league. And then they got stuck. We don't know that. That's what we don't know. But there's no question that Sutton is at his best inside, and therefore it didn't work because he's not really a good outside corner.
Yeah, he got 3 years, $33 million from the Lions, including $22.5 guaranteed. A lot of that actually ended up not being guaranteed as a result of his off-the-field incident, which allowed the Lions to move on from him. The other guy I want to ask you about, Greg, he just signed up for his 15th year of pro football. It's Jerry Hughes, 6'2", 254. Greg, he's a guy that if I asked all my buddies, they probably wouldn't know a whole lot about him. He's just been darn good for a long time.
I'm sure because you played, Ross, so you know what it takes. Those are the guys, for someone who didn't play, but who just sits and has been watching tape for years and years and years. Those are the guys I just love. And not that what I say matters about respect, but those guys I respect so much. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer. No one's going to think of him that way. But to play going into his 15th year and relatively at a high level almost every year. I mean, I'm sure he had some years that he wouldn't view as his best years, but rarely have we said, boy, Jerry Hughes stinks, he can't play. The guy has always been able to rush the quarterback. Some years he's put up better numbers than others, but you and I both know that the ability to rush the quarterback from the edge is always at a premium in this league, and he's been able to do that. And I just think it's remarkable that a guy could play that long at a pretty good level, and it's there's not many guys like that.
No, there's certainly not. I'll have more to say about Jerry a little bit later in the show because guys like that, man. I mean, what is he, 36 now? Like that is,
yeah.
I noticed a difference, Greg, and maybe it's because I had a back surgery, but I noticed a difference when I was 27, 28 versus 23, 24. And I got to be honest with you, even after football, just with my own personal workouts or recovering from a big night out on the town, 33 is a lot different than 27. You know what I mean? And so to keep playing football at this age against guys that are 10, 15 years younger, that is wild to me.
Hey, Ross, I can't remember 33, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, what you can remember, Greg, is what you value in quarterbacks. And I know you probably have some type of checklist, something you go through that you think are important. And what I think is so interesting about it, Greg, and we'll get into this, it's not the same for everybody. And that's kind of what makes it great, right? Like some people are going to value certain traits more than others.
Correct.
And I know it because I talked to you guys before the draft. And I can just tell, like Phil Simms, the guy having a really strong arm is really important to Phil Simms. Like he highly values that. Whereas other guys, like Chase Daniel, maybe they don't think it's quite as important. So I just think it's so interesting. And these guys both played quarterback for 10 plus years in the NFL. You've been studying it for 45 plus years. When you watch anybody, I guess in particular a college prospect, but maybe an NFL player too, where do you start? What are the traits that you value the most?
Well, to be honest with you, I really start at the very beginning. And by very beginning, what I do is I look at technique and fundamentals. I look at the drop back into the pocket. I look at the footwork. I look at where the quarterback holds the ball, which is called ball staging or ball carriage, because all these things are starting points that coaches teach. And I learned this really 100 years ago from a ton of different people, starting with Bill Walsh, but Ron Jaworski would talk to me about when Sid Gilman came in. Dick Vermeil brought him in to be the sort of the quarterback guru for Ron Jaworski. It all starts with repetitive mechanics. And you have to start there. It's like anything that you want to do well. You have to do it the same way all the time. And if you don't do that, you're going to have issues somewhere along the line. So if you then get beyond that, and by the way, that can often be a problem when you watch college quarterbacks, because so many of these young kids now grow up being in the shotgun, 7-on-7. We know how big that is throughout the country. And the footwork and the mechanics are not really a main focus. So you see a lot of quarterbacks that don't do that very well at all. And therefore, they miss too many routine throws because they're mechanically poor. You should throw the ball the same way every time unless the defense dictates otherwise. So you start there. Then if you want to get into...
Greg, let me jump in real quick. Because two things jump out to me immediately when you say that. First of all, I truly believe the best guy in terms of repetitive, replicable mechanics over and over, I think it's Brady. I think he's the best we've ever seen. And I think that's why he's the most successful we've ever seen.
Breeze was like that too.
Right. I mean, just unbelievable repetitive mechanics. Now, I will say this, though, Greg. On the flip side, you say throw it the same way every time and it should look the same. The best guy now, Mahomes, that's not the case with him. I mean, it looks different a lot from him. It's, he throws a different arm angle, different things. It looks the
same when he's clean in the pocket and delivers with timing and rhythm. But now you get into other things. But let's kind of walk through this because, as you said, different people might value different traits. But at the end of the day, when a quarterback coach or an offensive coordinator or anybody starts with a quarterback, you're building an offense, and you're building an offense with the sense that it's with timing and rhythm. In other words, the quarterback's drop and the receiver's routes have to time up. So now you're dealing with the quarterback hitting his back foot and being able to deliver the ball to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw. That's what playing quarterback is in a nutshell. That's the way the position is taught. So you have to be able to see that on tape. And then as you've watched, because I've watched tape for years and years, you develop an understanding of route concepts. You develop then an understanding of the corollary to that, which is what is the coverage versus specific route concepts, so you know where the ball should go. I actually had a conversation with a coach about this recently. You know where the ball should go based on the route concept versus a particular coverage. So you want to see if the ball comes out with timing, with some sense of anticipation. Is he seeing it clearly? Okay, that's very, very important. Vision for a quarterback, seeing it with clarity. There's a lot of coaches who believe that if a quarterback can't do that, and you can see that, let's say, with his college tape, that he's not likely to all of a sudden be able to see it better in the NFL where things are a lot different. So you want to be able to make the right kind of throw to the right receiver at the right time. That's quarterback playing in a nutshell.
You know what? I'm loving this, Greg, because I have another follow-up there.
No, yeah.
I will say this. All quarterbacks, the key, drinking Labatt Blue Light while they're watching game film, getting ready for the game, That's what I do to get ready for having a great weekend. Always enjoy responsibly beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. You know, it's so interesting, Greg, because what you just said about what playing quarterback is in a nutshell, you know, seeing it, reading the coverage, back foot hits, ball out to the right place at the right time. You know, I feel like with every year, Greg, I don't want to say we're losing that, but I will say that is losing its luster.
Yeah.
I feel like among fans and young people. It's why there are people that will tell you that Brady wasn't really that great. It was just the system, because that's what he did over and over and over again. But you know, Greg, that doesn't make highlights. That's not visually appealing to a lot of people. It's actually, to a lot of people, it's almost boring, if that makes sense.
You're 100% right. No one shows a clip of when it's 3rd and 7 and the quarterback completes a 9-yard ball for a first down. No one shows that. Those plays matter so much. Now, obviously, the way the NFL game has changed, we could have this conversation, by the way, for 4 hours, and I want people to understand that there's so many elements here, we just can't get to every single one. There's no question with the way the game has changed, particularly defensively, with a lot more late coverage rotation, a lot more pressure concepts, pressure schemes, pressure looks, that defenses win a lot more in terms of the early part of the down, particularly in passing situations where often defenses have the tactical advantage with what they do. So therefore, very often the quarterback is forced to move. Now, there's two different kinds of movement. There's pocket movement, which someone like Tom Brady was a master of. Someone like Joe Burrow is a master of, where think of a boxing ring that size, maybe a little smaller. The ability to move within that kind of confined space to avoid pressure, reset your throwing platform, and deliver the football. That's pocket movement. The other part of movement, of course, is getting out of the pocket and then making the play an outside of structure play, a second reaction play. It's not part of the timing and structure of the built-in play. We see that more and more because defenses have become better, and a lot more quarterbacks are now required and demanded to be able to do that at times. Now, we know Brady never did that. We know Breeze never did that. That gets into another part of quarterbacking. They're so good with what they see that they're able to play within rhythm and structure at such a high level. That's what you'd ultimately like, but it doesn't always work that way, and that's where we see the Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Lamars, the guys that can make those special plays outside of structure, and you're 100% right. That's what people respond to far more than just the repetitive mechanics and the repetitive brilliance.
You know, this is not a knock on the fans, Greg. It really is not. If a quarterback has subtle pocket movement, it's by definition subtle.
Yes.
And or if they deliver the ball on time to the receiver, it does feel like it does look easy.
Great point. It looks like anybody can do it, where no one looks at what Josh Allen or Mahomes or Lamar does and says anybody can do that.
That's exactly correct.
Right.
That's exactly right. And it's nobody's fault, but it's why there will be people that will swear that Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, the guys that do things that are visually impressive, and they see, like, all of those guys that you just named, Greg, they all can do a lot of things that, for example, Tua Tagovailoa cannot do, right? Like, he doesn't have that arm, he doesn't have that athletic ability, but Tua has some of that Breeze, Brady to him in terms of timing and rhythm. I mean, it's really pretty to watch when he is in rhythm in that Dolphins offense.
There may not be a better window thrower in the NFL when he's on his game than Tua. And see, to me, that looks pretty, because that, to me, is playing quarterback at a high level when you see those window throws, when he hits that back foot and delivers the football. And again, that gets into what I started with. He is among the best in the league in terms of the quickness of his drop, his plant, his ball staging, and his delivery. That's what Tua's game is. He's high level at that.
You know what I think is interesting too, Greg? What I wonder is, coaches. Do coaches all realize, like, do they look at Tua or guys like Tua and say, man, this guy is special because of what you just said? Or does Mike McDaniel secretly, he wouldn't say it publicly,
right,
does he think he could get other guys to do what Tua's doing? You know what I mean? Like that. And obviously they're probably discussing that right now because of his contract situation.
Right. Well, I think the larger question to me becomes, what is the value of the quarterbacks who can make those second reaction outside of structure plays? In other words, do you have to be able to do that to be able to be a truly high-level quarterback now with the evolution of the NFL game? And I think that's the question a lot of coaches debate. I know they do because I have these conversations. So, when you look at a quarterback, like I'll give you a great example, okay? I've looked at a ton of college quarterbacks. I really like watching Carson Beck play. Obviously Georgia maybe could arguably the best college program now. He played at a really high level last year. He chose to come back. He has enough movement that he can run for a first down, okay? But he's not a creator. He's not Mahomes. He's not Allen. He's not Lamar. I'm sure I'm leaving someone out. People will tell me, oh, you missed this guy. But he's not that guy. So the question is, when he's ultimately evaluated after this year at Georgia, and I'm sure he'll play well, and he'll be talked about as a top 10 pick for sure, if not higher. Are people going to say, yeah, but he can't make creative plays, and that's a knock on his game? And I don't have the definitive answer. To me, it's not a mathematical equation. There's no definitive answer. It's a question that coaches and evaluators talk about, Ross. Do you have to be able to make those plays in order to be a high-level quarterback now in the NFL?
I don't think you have to. But if you can't, boy, you better be really good at the other stuff we talked about.
That's
really
like Joe Burrow.
What it does is, why coaches love it, it's like when they screw up or when they lose the chess match against the defensive coordinator, it's really nice to have a quarterback that can still make them look good or make them look right.
But I think most coaches would say, getting back to something we said earlier, that if you can't throw it to the right receiver at the right time with the right kind of throw from the pocket, you can't be a great quarterback in the NFL.
I want to talk more about the college quarterbacks next week. And you said something really interesting, I thought, about defenses winning more now than they used to, especially early in the down in obvious passing situations. Yep. I'm going to put a pin in that, because I want to dive a little bit more in next week. I'm going to ask you about Quinn Ewers, probably, and Shedeur Sanders, because I'm curious about these guys.
I've seen them all in detail.
I'll ask you about them next week, but I also want to dive into that a little bit, because I want to know more about why that is. He is the man. I mean, I had like 7 clips Jack could cut for social media. He's going to hate me. I don't know which ones I'm going to pick. Unbelievable stuff, Greg. At Greg Cosell on social media. Nobody better. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. Biggest news was Jaguars defensive end Josh Allen changes his name to Joshua Hines Allen.
So he had a cool video around it and how much the name means to him. And I got to tell you, I'm glad that there won't be confusion between him and the Buffalo Bills quarterback anymore. What I didn't know is why he hasn't been Hines Allen the whole time. He didn't really tell that part of the story. I'm not sure what the background is there, but other than that, I'm glad that there's some differentiation now between him and the Bills quarterback.
Former Panthers VP of Personnel and Cardinal safety Adrian Wilson was arrested on 3 charges of domestic violence.
Not good on a lot of levels. He actually was an executive with the Cardinals for a while, which is where he played, was a tremendous, tremendous football player when the Cardinals had a really good run there. And he's had a pretty good career as an executive, but he recently was let go by Carolina, and now he's got legal issues.
And do you have any thoughts on the Hard Knocks offseason edition with the New York Giants so far?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty entertaining. And honestly, I haven't even watched the full episodes. Just some of the social media clips I feel like have been really entertaining thus far. I'll be curious to see if other teams do it, though. Feels like the Giants are revealing a lot and not looking that great as far as the all access. So I'll be curious to see if other teams are willing to do what the Giants have done in future years. We'll see. It's been great, though. I'm enjoying at least seeing some of these behind-the-scenes stuff. I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out, of course, to myfrontpagestory.com. It's by far the best gift you could ever get. Really, anyone, loved one, colleague, somebody retiring, whatever, anniversary, birthday. Backofficeschedule.com, human.nyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.